Hi everyone, and welcome to our Q&A presented by Just Love. My name is Paula and I'm talking to Judy Carroll. Judy is an internationally known author and now has 5 books in the Zeta series. Hi Judy.
Hi Paula, hi everyone.
So we are all constantly learning, growing and evolving, and recently Judy has had an awareness that she would like to share. This is very profound and ties in with a book that she read last year in 2022. The book is The Rendlesham Enigma, Book 1 Timeline, and it's authored by James Pennistone of the US Air Force, he's now retired, and Gary Osborn. It describes the landing of a UFO in Rendlesham Forest, which is close to the twin RAF bases of Bentwater and Woodbridge in Suffolk, England, and it was in 1980. This book was independently published on the 22nd of July in 2019. As a prelude to Judy's message, if we cast our minds back over the past few years, very clearly there has been massive change. We really are being given a wake-up call. Judy often talks about how we are moving from 4th world to 5th world consciousness, and therefore waking up to a higher, more expanded conscious awareness. We are being hit by extremely high vibrational frequencies, clearly able to be measured by changes to the Schumann resonance. And as these vibrations hit the planet, they are mutating and changing our atomic structure on all levels. Keep in mind that first and foremost, we live in a vibrational reality, and that vibrational reality affects the physical material world around us. We are biological beings, but we are also multidimensional biological beings. So we are multidimensional biological beings. We have deeper capacities within us that until now have been left untapped. As Judy has said many times in the past regarding Earth scientists deeming approximately 90% of our DNA as junk, we just haven't unlocked it yet. As multidimensional beings, we have the capacity to unlock and utilize all of our DNA, just as we have the capacity to unlock more of our potential conscious awareness. Judy's message has always been the same, and that message is the need for us to move away from divisiveness and polarity and to return to a state of balanced oneness, which is our only path to further evolution as a planetary species. So with that in mind, Judy will now tell her story.
Okay, thanks Paula. This book I read, entitled The Rendlesham Enigma, Book 1, describes the landing of a UFO in Rendlesham Forest, which is close to the twin RAF bases of Bentwaters and Woodbridge in Suffolk, England, in 1980. That was when it happened. Both these bases had been transferred to the United States Air Force in 1951 by the British Ministry of Defence, making it one of the largest and most important NATO complexes in Europe during the Cold War. The account given in the book is that of James W. Pennistone, a staff sergeant at the time of the incident. James was the main witness to the event, having got up close to the landed unmanned object. He had top secret clearance in his role at the base, and his credibility and honesty were highly respected throughout his years in the United States Air Force. The event began during the early hours of Boxing Day, December the 26th, 1980. Jim Pennistone approached the landed craft, took photos and made notes and measurements. There were 6 symbols raised like Braille on the side of the craft. Jim drew them and placed his hand on one of them. When he did this, a massive download of what eventually came to be a series of binary codes came into his consciousness. Back in 1980, binary codes were unheard of, so he had no idea what had occurred. Some missing time was involved. These codes played in his mind, disturbing his sleep. He felt compelled to write them down, which he did. He suffered PTSD and sleep disorders for years after the event, but finally sought medical help. He was put on medication to help him sleep. Some days after his contact experience, he was interrogated by AFOSI, which is the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. He was asked then and there to write an account of his experience, which he did and which covered 4 pages. When he finished writing, he was requested to hand this document over to them. During the interrogation, at one point, the questioner leant forward and stared into his eyes. Unbeknown to him, this act produced a hypnotic block in his mind, which was not discovered until he underwent hypnosis many years later to help his PTSD. At the end of the interrogation session, a shorter and very different account of his experience was handed back to him in place of the 4 pages he'd written. He was ordered to present this very altered and watered-down version of the event during any future inquiries or discussions. Other witnesses to the event were also dealt with by the AFOSI interrogators, resulting in a variety of fanciful and confusing stories being put out. Further confusion and sensationalism came into play when certain UFO researchers got hold of the story, twisting it to fit their own agendas. The book provides the name here of a very well-known female researcher, which I will not repeat here. Luckily, Jim did not mention the code during the AFOSI interrogation and did not show them his notebook. He kept quiet about the code for 30 years, worried that he was losing his mind and that he would lose his top-secret clearance and job in the Air Force. He finally spoke out about it with Gary Osborn, who was an expert in the field of code research. Gary was super excited as the code tied in exactly with other investigations he'd been doing for years on the Great Pyramid at Giza. As Gary Osborn explains at the end of the book, the timing of this information being released, along with the development of the computer technology to enable the deciphering and cross-checking of the code, cannot possibly be random. It's obviously been planned by a far greater off-planet intelligence. Aspects of it totally meet the criteria laid down by scientists as proof of the reality of a non-human intelligence at work behind the scenes. Downloaded into Jim's consciousness from the symbol on the craft that he's placed his hand on was a set of 7 coordinates. These are given in the book along with the ancient cultures connected with them. The first one is particularly significant to me, having had an experience with these beings back in 1995 in the UK. They are known in Ireland as the Tuatha Danaan, spelled Tuatha Dedanaan. I think I'm pronouncing the name properly. The coordinate connected with them is High Brasil Island, which is now submerged. They are also known as the Shining Ones, which is also what the Sanskrit term Deva means, or Diva as we pronounce it here in Australia. The other places indicated by the coordinates and the cultures associated with them are number 2, Canaa Pyramid, Caracol, Belize, south of the Yucatán Peninsula, Central America, the Mayan culture. Number 3, Sedona, Arizona, North America, the Hopi culture. Number 4, Giza, Egypt, the ancient Egyptian culture. Number 5, the Nazca Plain in Nazca, Peru, South America, the pre-Incan culture. Number 6, Mount Taishan-Ku, Shandong, China, ancient Chinese culture. And number 7, the Temple of Apollo, Portara, Naxos Islands, Greece, ancient Greek culture. Now, here is a quote by co-author Gary Osborn on page 638 in the book. And he says, I think that the results of the analysis of the binary code, which point to an ancient system of knowledge encoded thousands of years ago in the past, are going to surprise a lot of people who view the Rendlesham incident as just another UFO event. For example, there is a spiritual evolution of consciousness aspect to all of this, which is based on the esoteric teachings and traditions associated with enlightenment, which has also been encoded at Giza and used as a focal point in this regard. One of the major theses of the code is the central third point of balance, found in between all and any of the two opposites or extremes of our dual reality. We are being told that it is this midpoint in consciousness that we should understand above all else, and where we should be focusing our attention, especially if we wish to reduce conflict and all war and human suffering and evolve further. As an illustration to this, known as the Quantum Trinity, is provided in my Cosmic Spirituality book. It's particularly significant to me, as this is one of the main messages that the ETs I've worked with for many years keep putting out over and over again. It's a central theme of their teachings. We talked about this in our last Just Love episode 86 and included an illustration, if you want to go back and check. Now, to bring the information provided in the Rendlesham book and the encoded message into line with my own understanding, I'll read out a message that was put out in books written about an experiencer of positive contact by the Greys, a woman by the name of Betty Andreasen Luca, by author hypnotherapist Raymond Fowler. I had the privilege of sharing part of an interview with Betty some years ago and have two of Ray Fowler's 3 books written about her. The 2 I've read are The Watchers and The Watchers 2, but I believe the first book is entitled The Andreasen Affair, which I haven't read. During a hypnosis regression done on Betty by Ray Fowler, a message was recalled that the Greys had given her in a strange and unknown language. The language was analysed and turned out to be close enough to Gaelic to enable it to be translated into English. Gaelic was the language of ancient Ireland, home of the Tuatha Danaan. See code number 1. Here is the translation. The living descendants of the northern peoples are groping in universal darkness. Their mother mourns. A dark occasion forebodes when weakness in high places will revive a high cost of living, an interval of mistakes in high places, an interval fit for distressing events. Now, I've included this message at the end of my book, Human by Day, Zeta by Night. This connects the so-called Greys with the Tuatha Danaan, which I've suspected for many years, especially after an experience I had at a sacred site in Oxfordshire in the UK in 1995. I use the term Greys when referring to them in order to identify them as insectoid humans, originally insectoid humans, as opposed to mammalian or other type humans. Humans have been developed out of many different species in the universe. My understanding is that insects are a physical expression of the Davic kingdom, hence the vital role they play in their symbiotic relationship with plants and the nature kingdom. As I talk about in my book, Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth, Lessons in History, there was a race of ant people existing long ago on Earth, working closely with the nature spirits to create and develop natural environments and ecosystems on the planet to create diversity. These ant people were known as the gardeners of the earth. The ant people were almost wiped out by a later reptoid human species that I call the Repterans, developed on Earth at the time of the dinosaurs. The ant people's deep connection to Earth's environment and ecosystems explains their present concerns about the degradation of the planet's environment. The ant people ended up being driven deep underground by the Repterans, and some of them moved off-planet. These ones have evolved into what researchers call zetas, as that is one of the main star systems in which they settled. The ones who are still present on Earth have also evolved and are now dwelling in a finer dimension, having evolved past 3D physicality. They are part of the Davic kingdom, hence their close link with the mantids, who are the elders of their species. It was the ant people who taught the Hopi how to build their homes in caves and tunnels, hence the connection with the Hopi culture mentioned in code number 3, connected with Sedona in Arizona. It's the Reptarian controllers working behind both governments and religions on Earth who turn a blind eye to the desperate need for healing the environment of our Mother Earth. My experience with the Tour de Danaan connected with the Greys goes back to 1995 when I travelled to the UK and was taken to visit the Rollright Stones in Oxfordshire. They're not a major tourist attraction like Stonehenge, Avebury, etc., so the energy is still strong there. By sheer coincidence, it was the day of the summer solstice when we visited, and I just happened to be standing right in the very centre of the circle known as the King's Men at 12 noon. In a book entitled Circles of Silence by author Don Robbins, scientific tests are described that have been carried out at this site with ultra-sensitive sound equipment placed around and within the main circle. A strange pulsing pattern that rose and fell at the times of equinoxes and solstices had been picked up, but right at the very centre of the circle where I stood at noon on the day of the summer solstice, there was total silence, with none of the normal white noise that should have been present. Hence the name of the book, Circles of Silence. As I came to realise later, this is where the main energy portal, the one point of non-polarised energy, is located. One night 3 weeks later, when I was back in Australia, I had a very powerful dream, in inverted commas, in which I was quite ceremoniously taken in astral form back to the Rollright Stones. I rode in what I think is called a tumbril, which is an old-style cart with solid wooden wheels. On arrival, I was taken out of the cart and laid down on the ground in the very centre of the circle where I'd stood on the day of my physical visit. I found myself quite forcibly held down by several little people resembling small greys that I sensed were fairy folk. Their manner was playful and childlike, but I knew they meant business. A needle of about 20 centimetres in length was produced, and it had the most gorgeous blue faceted crystal on the end of it. The pointy end was inserted into my brow chakra, third eye chakra. I struggled and yelled out in pain and would have fought my way free if I could have, but the tiny hands that held me down were so strong. It only took a moment, thank goodness, and the needle was pulled out. I woke the next morning with a clear memory of what had happened, and would have dismissed it as just a dream, but I was urged to look in the mirror. And right there on my brow chakra was a tiny red crescent mark. It remained for several days after, and the scar remained for even longer. I still have a small white lump there. It was after this experience that an idea dropped into my head to start writing about my ET contact experiences. The difference was I was to write from the ET perspective. It was eventually explained to me that I'd been subjected to what was basically an acupuncture procedure, and that a download of information from my higher ET self that was stored in the blue crystal had been downloaded into my Earth human consciousness. I started doing research on the Rollright Stones, and it turns out that one part of the site, consisting of a single menhir known as the King's Stone, is situated on one of the most active fairy knolls in England. We sat on this knoll on the day of our visit to have lunch. The fairy lore surrounding this site is massive, and the knoll overlooks the village of Longcompton, which is said to have more practitioners of the old religion, Wicca, per head of population than anywhere else in England. I came to understand that the Greys are very closely linked to the nature spirits, so for sure the Tuatha de Danaan, the Shining Ones, which is what the Sanskrit word Deva means, were the ones who downloaded the information to me at the Rollrights, and the Greys who passed on the message in the Gaelic language to Betty Andreasen would be part of the same group. This then brings us full circle back to the encoded message that Jim Pennistone picked up by placing his hand on one of the symbols of the landed craft, which is the same message that I and others have been asked to pass on from the Greys and their elder mantids. That message is a need for us to move away from divisiveness and polarity and return to a state of balanced oneness, which is our only path to further evolution as a planetary species.
Wow. That's so amazing, Judy. Just how your story fits in with Jim Pennistone's experience involving the landed UFO. There's the code that was downloaded into his mind, carrying the coordinates, along with the message of oneness and balance. then the message that Betty Andreasen was given in Gaelic by the Greys when she was taken onto their ship, the connection that the Hopi people had with the Ant people, and the experience you had of being taken back to the sacred site in the UK. It really is just like a giant jigsaw puzzle that needs to be put together for the picture to be seen in its entirety. Wow.
Not kidding.
So, if you'd like to read more about any of this, Judy's books are available from Amazon, or you can go through her website, which is listed below. And the first book in the Zeta series is
Human by Day, Zeta by Night, followed by The Zeta Message, then Extraterrestrial Presence on Earth, Lessons in History, and my two most recent books, both Kindle editions and both also available in German, An Interview with an Alien, Comments by an Undercover ET, and Cosmic Spirituality, Blending Religion and Science in Oneness from an Off-Planet Perspective.
Thank you so much, Jude, and thanks everyone for listening. And if you liked this video, please share with your family and friends and subscribe to this channel. Sending you all much love, and bye for now.